Alright friends, welcome back to History with Tim Reacts. So today we're going to be covering somewhat of a controversial subject, but before we begin, just to give everyone a heads up, I'm going to be kind of missing this next week. I have 12 days straight of work. I've been called in for 2 extra days, so I don't have my usual days off. But I will try my best to comment, respond to comments, get content up, and be here. It's going to be very sparse because I'm only going to be doing things at night. But today we're going to be covering the Sabaton song Wehrmacht. Now, for those of you that don't know what the Wehrmacht is, Wehrmacht was the regular German army. So in World War II, you had the Kriegsmarine, that was the German Navy. You had the Luftwaffe, that was the German Air Force. And you had the Wehrmacht, which was the German army. And then you had the SS, but that was its own nightmare. But the Wehrmacht song is mainly talking about the myth of the Clean Wehrmacht. Now, for those of you that don't know what the myth of the Clean Wehrmacht is, the myth of the Clean Wehrmacht was this idea that German civilians and mainly German generals and field marshals were trying to say, oh, we didn't know what was going on with the Nazi government. We had no idea what Hitler and all of them were doing. We were just fighting the war. This was mainly made by men, very respected generals such as Erich von Manstein and Heinz Guderian, very high-ranking officers who, many of them, Guderian was chief of staff for a period, men who were on the high command and worked with the Nazis. To be a general, you had to be a member of the Nazi party, which you can say, oh, well, it was dictatorship. They had to do that. True. But at the same time, you could be, like Albert Speer, who was a member of the Nazi party, and he admitted, he's like, no, we were wrong. What we did was evil, and, we have to atone for what we've done. But many didn't, many wanted to retain their honor, so to speak, because of what happened. Now, this song is going to be about the debate of the Clean Wehrmacht. Now, personally, I look at the facts, and the reality is, and I believe it was at the Nuremberg trials, it was brought up to Field Marshal Keitel, because he was the head of the German army by the end of the war. It was said, he said, my objective was not the civilians, my objective was the war. The prosecutor then said, you and your soldiers didn't question when the SS would pull into towns right after you took them, and then half the population would disappear. So what this song is pretty much kind of like oh, were they good? Were they bad? Were they that? It's said that in order for evil to prevail, all that has to happen is good men do nothing. And that's the reality of why the Clean Wehrmacht myth is false. Because these men, sadly, chose to do nothing. Some did. You have the July 20th plotters and other assassination attempts. But, sometimes, even those situations, some members of those, it had nothing to do with what the Nazis were doing. It was because the Germans were losing the war, and they didn't want to lose the war. So they thought the easiest way to win would be to get rid of the Nazis and have a peace treaty. But that doesn't make up for the 12 million bodies that were left behind in the wake of the Nazi party. And that's what the song is discussing, that debate between that. And here at History with Tim, we do not condone, we do not support. We are completely opposed to the National Socialist German Workers' Party. We're completely opposed to the Nazi party in its full, any affiliates, any supporters, anything like that. We will not tolerate anything like that in our comments. And if I see anything like that in the comments, I don't like deleting things. I'm not that kind of person, but I will delete them. Because this is a subject that is very controversial, and unfortunately, it's very cut and dry what happened. And, you could say in war things happen, but those 12 million murdered, if in theory, in the eyes of the German state, were their civilians. So that was not war, it was murder. And the Wehrmacht themselves didn't have clean hands when it came to the war itself. So before this gets any more serious, let's get into it. Alright, friends, so like I said, this is about the Wehrmacht, so there will be a lot of unfortunately, Nazi and National Socialist imagery. In dictatorships, the ruling party end up putting their symbols in everything. So there will be a lot of symbolism of that era. But again, like I said, this is a controversial subject. Believe me, I know. But that's what is good about history, is that we're able to have these conversations. This is definitely an interesting conversation. Again, I think I made it very clear in the intro my opinions, and which most of my opinions are rooted in fact. So let's get into this. The Wehrmacht. All right, so let's stop there for a second. So, they talk about the idea of were they victims of the time, wars like before. There's that comparison that this was like World War One. Oh no, we didn't volunteer for this. Just Germany needed us, so we stepped up. We didn't want to do it, but you didn't see everything going on. They say the millions all around you. Not necessarily just from not just from the Holocaust. Think about the Russians, I believe, lost 12 million in the war. And granted, you could make the debate that some of those were done by the Russians themselves, but you didn't see the civilians getting killed. You didn't see, there's this idea, were they victims of the time, a part of the bigger plan, and then you see the Nuremberg rallies. The whole reason the Nazi Party rose to power was off, and they showed a clip of it, were off the coattails of the Versailles Treaty, because at Versailles, the Allied powers wanted to punish Germany for World War One, which you could make this, there's often a debate was Germany solely at fault, and you could debatably say when the Kaiser gave Austro-Hungary the blank check, that was them saying, yes, they're responsible. They told the Austrians they could do what they want. But the anger that Germany, because there's actually a very interesting thing about the Versailles Treaty. The entire Versailles Treaty, England and France wanted to punish. They wanted to punish Germany. But as the treaty was coming together and things were about to end, the only person who didn't want to punish Germany was the United States. And, as much as I'm not a fan of this man, Woodrow Wilson. But Wilson had lost the debate pretty much. But towards the end, he agreed to almost everything. But then England and France kind of took a step back and said, actually, this might be a problem. We might anger them by doing this. This might make a bigger problem than we want. And they went to Wilson and were like, hey, maybe we don't do this. And Wilson's like, I have just spent the last 12 months here with you. We're doing this. I am not debating it anymore. We're doing it this way, and that's it. That's something we don't learn about in history classes and things. That's things you learn by going a little more in. But, at the end, even the French and English realized, oh, this might be a problem. We might start a problem by doing this. And that's exactly, it was on the coattails of that the Nazi Party was able to gain their seats. The scary thing about the Nazis is they gained power through election. They didn't gain power. Of course, the Enabling Act is what made Hitler the absolute leader of Germany. That's what made him, the dictator. But the Nazi Party had 2/3 of the Reichstag under their control, and Paul von Hindenburg, the president of Germany at the time, had no other choice but to make Hitler chancellor, because it just didn't make sense that the Nazis had the biggest party and he was going to have another politician from a different party as the head of the government. Meanwhile, I believe Hermann Goering was actually the speaker of the Reichstag. So it didn't make sense. So unfortunately, that's how that happened. But they were getting this propaganda of, oh, we were this great country, we were this. It was these people's fault. It was their fault. And you could say that definitely played into it. Manipulation definitely played into this. But at the same time, there was that little bit in German soldiers that wanted that glory back. They wanted that glory, of people like Gerhard von Blücher beating Napoleon, or Otto von Bismarck uniting Germany. There was that Teutonic glory they wanted back. And, the Nazis were promising that to them.
Racing madmen on a leash, or young men who lost their way, and illusions of the right, racing real at times. Panzers on a line, for the Wehrmacht Myth, lethal regicide. What about the men executing orders? Panzers on a line, for the Wehrmacht Myth, lethal regicide. What about the men executing orders?
That's interesting because I like the idea of, oh, but look at all this, this military conquest we did, and this glory we earned. But then it's like, what about the men who are executing orders? Crazy madmen on a leash, or just young men that lost their way. Again, it goes back to that discussion: was this all just propaganda, or was this what they wanted? I have this debate, and like I said, we're going to be having our podcast soon. And my first guest is going to actually be my roommate, but very history-oriented person as well. But it's this idea of, what would you do if you were told you can do anything you want? I've often had this idea of what was in the Schutzstaffel, the SS's brain, that made them want to do what they wanted to do. Because that was the thing. This wasn't like, okay, I have to follow orders, I have to do, or else I'm going to get in trouble. This was, they had zeal for it. So what was it in their brain that made them want to do it? And, sadly, it comes down to that idea of a dog off a leash. Like, what would you do if you could do anything you want? And, the Wehrmacht is the madman on the leash, because they weren't allowed to do whatever they want. But were they evil? Or were they just young men who lost their way? It's interesting how Sabaton mixes the debate into the lyrics. Fun fact about that, real quick: the STG-44. It's strongly believed that actually is the inspiration for AK-47s. Kalashnikov, the man who made the AK-47, he was actually part of the Red Army that entered Berlin, and the Germans, towards the end of the war, had mass-produced STG-44s, which is it's kind of the assault rifle you see there. It's strongly believed that that's actually where the Kalashnikovs came from.
denunciations of the Reich may seem real at times. Panzers on a line on the Wehrmacht's mind. Equal clandestine. What about the men executing orders? Panzers on a line on the Wehrmacht's mind. Equal clandestine. What about the men?
Yeah, so that's, the Clean Wehrmacht myth is a very interesting thing because, Germany, you could debatably say pre-World War One, under Wilhelm I and Friedrich II, you could believe it was a place of honor. It was a place of this code of conduct and things, what you did and how you behaved, military honor and all of that. But the reality is, war, there is no honor in war. There's this great World War II movie called The Eagle Has Landed, and it's actually Michael Caine, great Donald Sutherland, Rob Duvall. It's a great movie. I would highly suggest watch it. It's based on a book by the same name, which is a great book. I would read it as well. But there's this part where there's the German paratroopers, which are Luftwaffe, they're actually called Fallschirmjäger, but they're trapped inside a church in England, and it's a second Rangers officer comes and talks to Michael Caine, who's the Fallschirmjäger colonel, and he tells him, he's like, Colonel, there's no honor in death, there's just death. And that always has stuck with me because, my grandfather was a Marine, I had other family in the military, and I've always thought about that quote. But, the Wehrmacht did not have clean hands in any of this. They again, the panzers form the spine, that whole chorus, the idea that, but look over here, look at the war, look at the, how we won, look how we conquered so quickly, how we did it, but then what about the men executing over here? You can bluster yourself up with victory, the parades and everything. You try to make it look like what's going on isn't happening, but then the reality in the back of your head is always saying, but what about this other stuff that's going on? You can hide behind the pomp and circumstance and the grandeur of all this stuff, but the reality is over here. And, a lot of them, towards the end, you could probably say a lot of them were just young men who were forced into combat. A movie I brought before, I think I brought it up when we did our review of Hearts of Iron, is Downfall, which is about the last few days in the bunker in Berlin, and you see these children who are fighting. That's what it came down to at the end of the day. And some of them were fighting ideologically, but some of them were fighting because they were sincerely afraid, because the other option were the Russians coming. And what the Wehrmacht did in Russia, they believed the Russians were going to retaliate very similarly. And if they were afraid of that, well, then what were they doing in Russia that would cause such a retaliation? So that just goes more to disprove this Clean Wehrmacht myth. And, Sabaton always does a great song illustrating the discussion, especially a discussion like this. Like I said, this is a very controversial subject because, you can sit here and say, but Tim, they were soldiers, they were just doing what they were told to do. That's not how that works. That maybe in medieval war, maybe in that, American soldiers, did we do evil things? Yes, we did things wrong during World War II just as much as any. We at Iwo Jima we executed Japanese prisoners because some people thought it was easier than having to keep moving forward with the prisoners. At Dachau, the soldiers that liberated Dachau executed the guards. War is a gray area, but at the same time, like I said, it wasn't war what they were doing, because they did assist in the Holocaust. Who were the ones lending troops to the Einsatzgruppen and the SS? It was the Wehrmacht. And it's sad that people like Guderian and Manstein and these officers of repute tried to make this lie where it took someone like Albert Speer, who Speer was deathly loyal to Hitler, but Speer, after the fact, finally sat down and reassessed everything to himself, especially after Hitler ordered Operation Clausewitz, which was the destruction of Germany. He finally was disillusioned, and finally realized, my God, what have we done? All right, friends. So, as I said, this was always going to be a very controversial video. I know this definitely took on a more serious tone than most of my other videos. And believe me, there's still a few more Sabaton songs that I think are going to be even a little more serious. We haven't even touched Final Solution, which is the song about the Holocaust. I hope that's not one I do soon, because, you know, this is recent. You know, World War II, everything that happened, the Holocaust, everything. This is they're survivors still. You know, I've met a few of them. This is recent, and this hits home for me because, again, I grew up as a living historian. I grew up in New York. We have a very high Jewish population there, and we have a lot of Jewish centers. And growing up, I would visit these, and a lot of the time we would have survivors who were there, and, you know, they would tell us the things that happened. So I always try to be as respectful as I can through these things, because it is horrible. It's the worst that we've ever seen. You know, you can say certain actions of people are evil, and they are. But when you have an entire government dedicated to destruction and just of a whole group of people, it's just a whole other ballpark, and it's evil. It's sickening. So I hope that didn't sway you too much. I really don't know if you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it factual. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really, again, you know, I thought it's nice to do serious things. You know, this is a history channel, so, you know, a lot of times I'm kind of very cavalier during these videos, especially my reactions. But this is a very serious subject, and I thought it had to be treated that way, respectively. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed, learned something. If you're new to the channel, or if you're returning and not yet subscribed, I please ask you to subscribe. We're growing at such a good rate, and I'm so happy on the growth, and I am so beyond appreciative for all of you that have been here with me all the way through this. Thank you so much for all of your support and help. Please like, share, and comment, as always. Again, I'll try to respond. I'm going to be very busy this week, but I'm going to do my best. And we will see you in the next one.